Right now, I am speaking with Jason Phelps from Phelps Game Calls. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, first things first. You had a big deal go down with MeatEater. Is that so? Did he? Are you guys partners now? Did he take over? How's that working out?
So, when the proposal was, it was full acquisition, so full asset, take over the company, basically buy all the assets. So it was, yes, we are still, MeatEater purchased us on 12/31 of 2020. And yeah, so we are now, Phelps Game Calls is one of the companies under the MeatEater umbrella, MeatEater Inc.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been good. They've given me some resources that, I can build an elk call, but I'm not necessarily the best at running the business. So it was nice to have some professionals to help run the business and hopefully get to where I'd like to see it at some point.
Gotcha. When did you start your business? How long have you had it before they got
So
involved?
we've been building calls since early 2009. We started messing around a little bit with calls. So we've been at it now for 12 years, 13 years.
What inspired? Were you all calling and just like, I can make my own calls. I can do this.
It's kind of a combination of a few things. I was always remember, I liked to call elk back then, and I'm just, man, there's nothing that seems to be that consistent. Or I would go to the store and buy 20 calls. And I'm like, all right, 4 of them are good. Like, why are the other 16 bad? I'd love to be able to just go call go calling a diaphragm out of the package every time and it'd be perfect. And it wasn't the case. And then kind of paired at that time, I can remember going to a very small sportsman show local here. And there was a somewhat local call maker that was there selling calls. And I can remember kind of standing back, third row. I wasn't necessarily talking to the guy. I wasn't paying attention to what he was, his spiel, but I could just remember sitting there listening to the sound of like his elk call or the sound of his crow call. And I'm like, man, this guy's selling calls, but these sound horrible. And I'm like, if this guy can do it, and I knew enough about running a lathe, I knew enough about running machines. I'm like, there's no reason I can't do this. And so I can remember jumping on the forums and just like, what would it take to build a business like this? Around being a game call manufacturer, designer, and it just kind of got the wheels in motion. Back then you don't really pay that much attention to the progress we went through. It was just kind of, I'll go out in the shop tonight and mess around, or get my file out, or do this, or mess with that. And it just slowly evolved into me turning my first call probably 6 or 7 months later, and like, it sounds pretty good. And then always wanting to improve on that. So it was a combination of inconsistencies on what I could get out in the market, kind of the one exposure to, I'm like, that guy just made $40 for selling a call that sounded like garbage. And then, just slowly started chipping away at it.
How did that feel? Because I know when I tie my own flies and I catch a trout on a fly I tied, how did it feel calling in your first elk with your own call that you made?
It's pretty cool. I mean, to know that you didn't, have to go to the store and, buy that call, or, I built this diaphragm and it works, great. It's pretty cool. I also understand though that I'm the only one, me and a few of my builders that I'm now the guy that's making calls for somebody else. So it's one of the things I think that have helped build the company to what it is that I still remember like me going, to the archery shop, picking that one call up, and then being disappointed when I open up the packaging and go to use it for the first time. So we take a lot of pride in, that call when you open, it's going to be the same as the last 20 that you've bought.
Nice. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say kind of a funny story. Nothing gives me more anxiety than we get to go to a lot of events and stuff. And a lot of times somebody will hand me one of my calls that's in a package and say, we want you to bugle to open this thing up, or we want you to give us a sample. And I'm like, normally I would love to like had a chance to test that call just to make sure it doesn't squeak, and myself and Dirk Durham, after a couple hundred times of doing that and never having a bad call, I'm like, all right, I can at least hang my hat on. But there's still that, no matter how many times it's worked out, there's a little bit of anxiety And the point of like opening a brand new call and then having to bugle in front of, a couple hundred people or whatever it is in an event. But it's been good so far.
Yeah, I guess it'd be kind of embarrassing if it busted out and it sounded like a turkey. You'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
So when did you, so you grew up in the mountains and can you remember your very first elk hunt?
I can. I've told this story quite a bit, but growing up, my dad, my uncles, my grandpa, everybody that I grew up with here is a logger. Everybody's cut trees for a living or, harvested trees, got them to the mill, whatever process it is, a long lineage of loggers here in Western Washington. And they hunt elk very different than a lot of people, even, east of the Cascades. I live here in Western Washington. It was a lot more spot and stock, a lot more, open terrain hunting. Here, they wouldn't let the young kids, when I got my hunting license at 8 years old or whatever it was, I can go deer hunting, but they would never let you even get in the truck on opening day elk season or any day of elk season, because these guys would go look at a clear cut for 15 minutes. If there weren't elk in it, they were diving off into the timber all day. They would just leave their truck, go hunt a piece of timber, go to the next piece of timber, and it wasn't really made for young kids that couldn't keep up back then. And so I can remember like just waiting, wanting, like, what was this mystical thing of elk hunting that I didn't get to do? None of it made sense. So I can remember junior high age, my dad asked me if I wanted to elk hunt. And I'm like, I wasn't ready. You guys told us that this was something you got to do in high school. But they had opened a muzzleloader season up in our area, and my dad thought it would give him more opportunity to be in the woods and then give me an opportunity to go try it. So I can remember very vividly my first muzzleloader elk hunt, and I was lucky enough to kill a pretty good bull on that first ever hunt.
And your record speaks for itself. So I wanted to talk to you about, since it's summertime and we're less than 2 months away, when do you scout year round, or is there a certain time you really start focusing on summertime? Like, what's your process? And I'm new, like this is my first year in Montana. I'm usually e-scouting when I was living in Texas. And luckily every time I've only killed one bull, but I've been able to get into them just by kind of going off, what I've learned from you and Jason or Corey. And so how would you, for me, new to Montana, and I'm out, how would you suggest I go out and scout? Would you look for cows? Would you look for the bulls? How would you go about scouting summertime?
So I'll give you what I do versus what people should do. I've been very lucky. I'm only 38 years old. Whether that's I've been elk hunting for a long time and got to learn from some of the best. I've proofed enough different spots on the ground where I've sat e-scouted. I used to spend more time e-scouting than anything else, just looking for water, looking for food, looking for cover, looking for spots that should hold elk. And so I did a ton of that, but then I've never not found elk where I thought there should be elk. And so I would tell any elk hunter, new elk hunter, do not do what I do now, do what I used to do, because now I'll look e-scout a little bit, say I want to go out this trail, that trail. And we usually show up and hunt. I wish I didn't have such a busy schedule and could do some of the things that I wanted to do, but it really limits like how much time I can scout. Plus a lot of the spots we're hunting are now out of state, which doesn't really give me a lot of opportunity to go proof it with boots on the ground, versus when I hunted around home, I could go up, hike this trail, hike that trail, set cameras. So somebody new to an area, I would come up with a list of 1 through 5, A through E, whatever it is, and come up with multiple spots. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that they have an area figured out, and then they put all their eggs in that basket, which is we did early on, and it didn't pencil out. Like, well, we're in here, we've got 8 days of food, we've packed it in here, and some of those things start to kind of, hey, we don't want to leave, or hey, we've hunted this same trail 5, 6, 7 days in a row. I don't know how many times I've hunted an area where we may be getting to a little bit different spot than they are, but they hunt that same trail every day. I leave the truck at 6:30, I hike out to this point by 7:30, and I return back to my truck, and some of these people aren't finding success. And it's really like, don't force yourself into a spot, but that kind of gets back to the e-scouting, is come up with 5, 6 different spots that are going to work. And if spot A isn't good enough for you to concentrate your time, or there's not enough elk, to keep you busy, then move on to spot B and continue that on, because somewhere in that unit, as long as you're not out in like a a desert unit with very, very low densities, or a unit that just has low densities of elk, you should be able to move somewhere in that unit and find more sign and more animals. So when I'm e-scouting, I'm always looking for water. The elk have to drink. They're large animals. They need to go to water once, if not twice a day. There are some exceptions to that rules. Or there's some nomadic elk that might hit water once every 2 or 3 days. But the majority of elk that the majority of people are going to hunt, they're going to need to find water. They're also going to need to have some security. They're going to find that security through lots of timber, lots of brush. They need spots to escape to where they can be safe. So I'm looking for areas that have water, very closely or adjacent to have some escape or some security. And I'm also looking for what's their food source in that area. Alpine's easy because you're like, oh, they're eating the grasses above tree line. The other thing you're looking for, can these elk sustain and live inside the timber? Like, is the timber open enough? Is it an area that's pine versus fir trees or juniper, where like, oh, there's enough feed under, they may not have to ever come out of there. So there's a lot of spots where we hunt where there might not be an opening or a clearing forever, but it's it's loaded full of elk. So you got to, some of that stuff will be learned over time. But you're looking for food, you're looking for water, and you're looking for security. I look for things like trails, animal trails in the area. You're using forums, you're using like, are there elk in the area, or harvest statistics. Some of this will all let like, well, those aren't deer trails, those are probably elk trails or whatever. And you're just trying to kind of build the intelligence on that area from your computer. And that's kind of what we do now before we go on any hunt, is look into some of that information. And we don't do a whole lot of boots on the ground scouting anymore.
Yeah, that's what I first did. So I've been here since May, and I've been excited. So I take my dogs hiking, and I kind of do a scouting trip at the same time. And so I found a spot here in Montana. I was on X using Fat Maps, Google Earth, and I found this nice wet area. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go out. My goal today is to find an old wallow. And I trekked through, and then I found the one spot, and I start walking up. Sure enough, found a wallow. And I was also, there's so much elk sign in this area.
Yeah.
And then I go into the office the next day, and it turns out it's a hunting district 380 here in Montana, which apparently is a once in a lifetime draw. So it was a waste. I mean, it was a cool trip, but yeah, it was. Yeah. I was like, oh, because there was this unbelievable sign. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing, applying the same that I did, but now I can actually get up to this area and check it out. And I found some cool spots. What about, so as you know, the West, I mean, this is the first rain. I've been here since May, and really steady rain in a while. Is that, and you mentioned water is a very important thing for elk, especially if they're not migratory. And with the dryness in the West this year, like last year I went to Utah, I go to Utah every year, and I could not believe how dusty and dry, and like you said, picking, the year before, I couldn't not hear a bugle. And last year, nothing. And it was dry, and I just relied on that one spot. And this year I'm making it a point to get 5, 6, 7 spots. So what about that? Yeah. Like, it's really dry this year. Are we going to see a difference in their patterns? Because they got to find water. So
and I'll use some examples from a 2018 hunt in Idaho. It was very, very dry above timberline. All of our research had led us to some spots that you can even do some searching online and be like, oh, that people have killed elk in here, or they openly talk about it, or like it should have been good. And we got there, and as you start to get above timberline, you take your trekking pole and like, oh, the grass is literally breaking around, like it's so dry and brittle. And then you realize very quickly, like, if I can't live up here off my back because there's no water, the elk, they as well can't live. And so on that hunt specifically, what does an elk, the elk can't just like migrate to a unit over. They can't just, migrate hundreds of miles to water. They're in the area. You just have to figure out how they can live in that area. And so very quickly we sat down, opened up Onyx, and started going through like, well, this is a what we did on that one is, knowing water, the longer the watershed, or the more contributing area, that creek's going to be more likely to have water in it. And so if it's creek water is going to be your longest lasting, or river water, over say a wallow or an area that's collected water during the wet months, and then will slowly dry up and evaporate. So we moved all of our focus onto some areas with some longer drainages, that we knew had water. Just driving down the road, you're like, oh, there's a creek that flows under here. It's flowing pretty good. Let's go hunt this drainage. And by using some of those, just that little bit of information that's wide open for everybody to see, we left the spot up on the mountain that had no water, and came over to a spot that had a flowing creek, and 5 or 6 miles up it, there were more elk than you could shake a stick at. And so we had to completely change. Like we might have, spots A, B, and C were all dry, no food. Go to a spot. I mean, these elk are willing to drop in the timber if they have to live there. If they don't have any food up high, they're going to find food in that timber where it's more shaded, not getting burnt. And then they're going to just drop down. So use some of that, and don't get hung up on forcing yourself to hunt an area, because if you can't live there, the elk can't live there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. And
if you're looking, like wallows, are typically they're formed by two different, they can be a depression or a low spot. It's sometimes tough to tell how that wallow is generated until you get there. But if your spot has like a spring or an aquifer that's not going to dry up regardless, then that one's still going to be good. I would look at going back to those this year. If it's just a hole in the ground, then those ones are most likely in a year like this. We're in 15 days into July, and it's already really, really, like, we're at end of August type, water situation. I would think that those ones are going to be dried up this year.
Is your main focus, like this time of year also, do you focus more on where the cows are, or then you kind of want to see some bulls, of course, because you want to see what's out there, but because they could be, where they are right now, they could be 10, 20 miles away come September. So do you focus on more where cows are?
I do. So when I go and scout, you can scout bulls, you can scout cows. Sometimes they're in close proximity. Sometimes they're completely different spots on the mountain, the hill. Ultimately, the elk are going to end up where the cows are at more times than not. And we've proved this multiple times. We've watched giant herds up in the high country of 100 to 150 elk. The bulls, the 10 bulls are in a bachelor herd on the different side of the ridge or a different side of the mountain, and they always ultimately end up where the cows were. Now there's a lot of dynamics that go on. It's not as simple as just saying these 10 bulls walk across the mountain and join with this group. They're going to break up into smaller herds, unless there's just even if there's a magnum bull in the area, he can't control that many cows. And so what happens, the bulls come find the cows, they break off into smaller herds, and then they disperse a little bit. So cows are more important. A lot of guys and gals, they'll get a bunch of trail cam pictures of good bulls leading all the way up, and then hunting season, guess what, August 25th gets here, and their bulls start to disappear off their cameras. It's like, where'd they go? Well, if you would have known where the cows were at, that would have been to your advantage. The other main thing, which is to me is even more important than finding cows or bulls, if I'm scouting an area, a lot of times I'll make it a point to drop in and check on some benches. Like if there's areas where bulls are going to bed, lay up in the middle of the day, and I really look for rubs, because rubs are an indistinguishable fact that elk rutted there the year before. If you get into a patch of timber and they've got every tree tore up, and the chances of them coming back to that area is very, very high, because if we break it all the way down to what I had said earlier, the elk need food cover and bedding, or food cover and water. That spot obviously has provided it for elk for many, many years, and they're smart enough to keep making it back. The calves in that herd know that they've lived there safely. If the lead cow ends up dying off, the next dominant cow, like, she's going to know, as well as the bulls, like we found safety here. The wind swirls here every day. Like, there's reasons why they like spots, and they'll continue to come back. So, more than, finding elk crap in July isn't a good indicator of anything. Finding cows and bulls is good. It lets you know there's elk in the area, and you can usually trace their drainages back up. They're going to be somewhere in that vicinity. Focus on the cows more, but the best sign that I can take away from a scouting trip is a bunch of elk rutting activity, which you get through rubs.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I haven't really seen. I saw a bunch down off of 15, of course, in unit hunting just at 380, a ton of cows.
Yeah.
But I actually saw my I've been hunting for decades, Jason. I grew up in upstate New York, so we didn't have obviously elk and stuff, and never saw a bear. Hunted in Colorado, been to Montana, Utah. I finally saw my first bear here in Montana. It's pretty awesome. So I was excited about that. But yeah, I want to do some bear hunting too. So and we all know like once the bachelors they break up and start heading to where the cows are and stuff. When when do you typically, because a lot of guys like to hear them bugle and stuff, when do you typically start? Is there, I mean, I can't put a set date on, but when do they normally start? You start hearing the bugles? Because when you're in
I
Utah,
mean, you can,
I think it wasn't even the end of August yet, and I gave out a location bugle at night, and the woods came alive.
I mean, and the bulls will bugle year round. So I mean, but there's a difference
Yeah.
between like social bugling. Matter of fact, I remember hiking into my very first high country scouting trip ever, and I'm like, there's a bull bugling like July 28th. Like, what the heck's going on here? So they will bugle year round. I would say as far as like rut and bugles coinciding and bugles because of the rut. August 25th is always that day where around home here in Western Washington, we could get bulls to bugle fairly regularly. Or I could, if I was just to drive into an area I know had elk, I would probably hear a bull bugle, late that evening as the sun was going down. And so August 25th is that day where I always figured stuff's going to start happening. Now, things don't really turn on until 8, 9, 10. And this is from my experience and a lot of Idaho hunting, Colorado hunting, New Mexico, like 9, 10, things start to get going pretty good. And then, they'll go all the way through September. And then it depends where you're at across the West and herd dynamics and the amount of cows and second and third cycles. But by October 15th, things will start to taper off. But it doesn't, it's not, that's just the generalities. There's exceptions to the rules where, my wife's first bull, he bugled probably 300 times on October 27th. We were dang near to November and he was still just cranking. And it just depends, like if a younger cow comes back in, second, potentially a third cycle. I mean, these bulls may be rutting all the way through November. Now, why it's not typical, it can happen.
Do you think this dryness will also affect when the rut will occur? Does you think that'll have any
Uh,
impact?
it may affect like the intensity of the rut, but the rut's all dictated by like photo period. So length of the
Yeah.
day getting shorter and shorter. So it may affect the rut. Like, in my opinion, if it's super hot, bulls are tired, that's a lot of stress on them to do what they do for, 30 to 45 days. I feel like on hot weather, elk get lethargic. Um, I also, and I've never tested this theory, it's just kind of in my head. Um, when the ground is dry, that cow and heat scent estrus, like, they're smelling that, they're picking it up day after day versus it's not getting washed out by the rain. And so I've always thought that like dry Septembers are sometimes good for rut. Now I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, the dryness will affect the intensity of the rut, but they're still going to rut at the same time. Similar to the moon, I get asked that same question a lot on moon, and it will affect it, but it's to the point where I'm still going to hunt, during the moon, as long as it's during the peak of the rut. It's just going to affect how early or how late things happen, but they're still going to be rutting somewhere on those specific days.
And isn't it true that with dryness too, less water availability, doesn't it affect the growth of the bull's antlers as well? They're not as dense or something. They're thick and
Yeah,
big.
yeah, but I mean, some people, we could probably argue it for, what makes elk have big horns and finish out. Some people say it's not really the rain, it's the minerals that the rain brings into the area. They need the water for the lush grasses. But yeah, as far as they will grow, less dense horns, and it may affect how they, either finish. Typically, it's a finish out problem because the way that elk start to grow their horns, they start at their eye guards or brow tines, whatever you want to call them, and they finish out towards the end. Well, they're growing the end of their horns as it starts to get into June, early July. And so sometimes you'll get like a bull that looks like he should be really good, and, have really good fronts, and then he kind of, peters out towards the top with shorter points and shorter main beams. But a lot of people, the smaller bulls are still growing, but most of your big bulls are done growing by 4th of July. Like they're completely done. They are what they're going to be. They may be, they're not going to put on anything else, where some of your smaller, more immature 2.5, 3.5, 4.5-year-old bulls still may be putting horn on here for the next month.
What's the scariest moment you ever had hunting? Have you ever encountered a grizzly?
I've seen grizzlies. Always kind of just kept my distance and
Yeah.
let them do their thing. Like I've never came like face to face with a grizzly and had to deal with that. The most nervous and the most shocked I've ever been was on a goat hunt, just because of the absolute extreme terrain, and just snow on top of the cliffs, on top of the recovery of the animal is just it's. I'm pretty experienced in the mountains. I don't necessarily mind exposure too much, but exposure at that level where, and I feel like it's over dramatized, but it's not. Like when a slip up is now life or death versus you maybe busting your shin or knee on a rock, like it changes the entire game. Like you can't
Yeah,
miss a
hell yeah.
step, and so you really start to think like, do I really need to, even though in the back of my mind, I know I need to go down to that spot so I can look off the edge. Is it really worth it? And so you really start to question, like, how much is this damn goat worth? Do I need to get there? But so that was really like, and it was more of just an internal struggle, which it wasn't necessarily like I was never faced with, I'm about ready to die, but like the whole entire hunt was, I don't know if I really need to get there. But I've never had like just any crazy, like scary, we've had black bears come up on us and stand their ground, but I've never got too nervous over those. But yeah, nothing. I've lived a pretty boring hunting life. Like none of the crazy stories some guys have where, grizzly bears are on their meat or this or that. We've just been, cautious and smart up to this point, and haven't had any big run-ins.
You mentioned inner struggle. Do you, so the mind game too? You can go. I remember watching. So, for example, Destination Elk with Corey, and he said it was 8 or 9 days before they finally get into bulls bugling, and he said, you didn't see behind the scenes where I was getting angry with people, and it was wearing on them. So, how do you
Yeah.
what do you suggest for guys to stay focused and understand there's going to be those days when it's quiet, you know how it is. You got to get up early and you're all excited, and then all of a sudden it's like silence, and it's just heart, it's heart-wrenching, and you just try and remember they're here, they're here, they're just quiet, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. So I'm going to give some answers that most people might not like. And you're like, Jason, I wanted like an exact answer. Like mental toughness is something that I can't give anybody. In my opinion, I couldn't give you advice to make you like stick it out or see it through. Or I've hunted with I've got the fortune to hunt with a lot of different people, and all of my good buddies are like ironclad tough. Like we've built each other we've got super thick skin. We've built each other to the resilience, kind of that it kind of sounds stupid to say, but we've built in the mental toughness. Like we're not going to let each other fail. We're going to try to be tougher than the next guy. We're going to stay positive. And so mental toughness is one of those things where it's almost like it's natural. You either have it or you don't, or you can maybe polish up the little bit that you have and make it tougher. But it's one of those things where it just comes down to your personal will and resiliency to stick it through. Like, how bad do you want it? Are you, and I've also had the fortune of a lot of success. So where maybe a guy who isn't having as much success, like on day 6, just can't foresee themselves being successful. Like it's just not going to happen. Day 6, I've heard one bugle and it's not going to work. Where I've hunted long enough to know that on some of my hunts, like the success came on the 8th or 9th day. Like it was a bad hunt until then, but all it took was the one call in, the one opportunity to change the whole outlook of that hunt. I could have did that on day 1. And that's where people don't get, even the best elk hunters out there aren't going to get it done on day 1 every time, especially when it's archery elk. And there's so many, you can take the best elk hunter in the world, throw them in a spot where the wind won't cooperate for 10 days, and he's never going to kill an elk, no matter what he does, no matter how good a caller he is, no matter what decisions he makes. And so the guy that kills an elk on day one, 4 years in a row, on year 5, what if he wouldn't have seen an elk for the next 9 days? Like maybe he just hit it on the very perfect day. And that's where there's so many variables on an archery elk hunt that mental toughness it's got to come from within. You've got to want it bad enough. You've got to know that every hunt you go on, you're going to be successful. And so I wake up every day expecting to notch my elk tag. I go on every night hunt and expect, somewhere in that day, like I approach every single stock like I'm going to notch my elk tag. And so that's the mentality I go into a hunt with, where, if you can't foresee that happening, like you're going to start to give up and you're going to doubt yourself. You're going to start questioning, is this really worth it? Like, are the next 4 days worth my time? And you're going to, people will typically give up early. The only advice I have is to find a hunting partner. If you're a solo guy, some great advice is to find a hunting partner with some resiliency, where you can, if you're down one day, your hunting partner can lift you up. And if he's down one day, you can lift him up, and really kind of piggyback on each other's strengths and weaknesses to kind of pull through on a hunt like that.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that too. It's like, all it takes is that one call to change everything. I mean, you could be doing it it's the same with turkey hunting. It's quiet, and then all of a sudden you hear a gobble, and then it just, the whole dynamics of that hunt change, and then it happens so quick usually too. Everything just it just unfolds. You're like, holy shit, and it's over, and you're like, whoa. But yeah, it's sticking that out. And I mainly solo hunt, so that's a real mind fuck sometimes when you're by yourself and all you have is yourself to talk. You just have to remind yourself it's over that ridge, or you just stick it out. Yeah, you're right. Stick it out. Do you do a lot of solo? You like, most of the time I see video and stuff, you're pretty much with one or two guys or more.
Yeah, we've got a camera guy at least always, so I'm not talking to trees, out there and going crazy. So we always have somebody to bounce ideas off of. But a perfect example of mine and Dirk's and John Gabriel's hunting in Mexico last year. Like, you're in New Mexico, it should be great, but I didn't loose an arrow until day 8, and Dirk didn't shoot until day 9. But things got very, very difficult, day 1 through 7, where things just weren't happening. Where bulls weren't responding. So I mean, it's just like, no matter how good of an elk hunter you may be or claim to be or are, there's just hunts, no matter what area, it's just not going to pencil out until a certain time. And there's little like micro changes in the rut where, for some reason the weather, or you might get a wind or rain, like it's going to affect your hunt, but don't let it like affect the outcome. Like it's in a very short timeline. So force yourself to stick with it if you can. But like I say, there's no amount of guidance or advice I can give, I don't think, to like make somebody mentally tougher.
Yeah, it's just trial and error and sticking to it and fighting through. Do you value those mid-morning, early afternoon naps? Those just little power naps that I bring a hammock, and I'll sometimes between two trees, and just next thing I know, it's like 2 hours later, and wow, do I feel so much better.
We hunt a lot through if we can stay on a bull or stay with them, we'll hunt a lot through that. I'm the worst sleeper ever, like bugs and creepy crawlers and stuff. Like, I just can't ever fall asleep or sleep very well. So I'm the guy that ends up like, I'm ready to get up, I'll wake everybody else up. So I don't sleep a whole lot, but there are some days, maybe 6 or 7 day in on a hunt, and I'm just completely beat and can't catch up on sleep, where I'll find a good shady spot and finally zonk out. But it doesn't seem to be very often, where we're either trying to hunt through that time, use that time to go look at bedding areas or spots where we haven't got to check out, in the prime time. So a lot of times we're still hunting that middle part of the day. But I do love a good nap when I can finally get one in.
Do you mainly base camp, or do you maybe like you'll go out and pack and just get out there far, or most of the time it's just base camp?
So we do a lot of base camp, a lot of truck camping, especially if we're like national forest trailhead type stuff, where we'll just throw out we have a bedroll, a canvas cutter. We'll just throw it out next to the truck, sleep on the gravel, throw it back in the truck, and then take off hunting the next day. Until an area is good enough to commit, 2 or 3 days. If an area is good enough with enough elk, then we'll go grab our food, grab our spike stuff. So we always leave that sort of stuff in the truck. But there was a time where I wanted to spike out for 10 days on all my hunts, and then there's times where if I just want to kill an elk, Some of this other tactics are better, like go find the right spot to spend your time versus, once again, putting all your eggs in one basket. If you're spiking and moving, like if you're camping in a different spot every night versus like a spike base camp, then I think that has more advantage than just, hey, I'm living out of my backpack and off my back, but I've got my tent staked down here and we're not moving. Sometimes is, just as this, a disadvantage is staying at a base camp or not being willing to move, on at your truck either.
So let's talk about calling. Um, and specifically since you called in calling contests, my first one's coming up this Saturday. How, so for me, I actually got some good advice. I reached out to Paul Metal there, Elknut, to thank him
Yeah.
because the lip ball, I was having the hardest time trying to get that down. And I got his app and I watched it and I just like, he said, "No, this is the advice he gave to me." And that was, he said, slow it down. He said, a lot of guys will come in there and just want to throw everything at you. And instead of like
Yeah.
focusing on the cleanness of the call and making it sound like an elk. And he said,
Yeah.
you don't need to have 7, 10, 100 call, just do
Yeah.
good on each call. What do you suggest? Like, what is some of your advice to give to guys entering contests?
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is my advice, whether it's right or wrong, slow it down, lead off with your absolute best call. So, you got to have some critical evaluation of yourself. Like, is my high note bugle better than my lip ball? Are my chuckles and grunts the best? Is my bark scream the best? Like, whatever is in your routine, whatever you feel like you do best at, I would lead off with that. I've got to judge a whole lot of contests as well as calling them, and at that very first sound, a judge's mind is made up 90% of the time. If somebody just comes and knocks a high note out of the park, it's easy for you to think that guy knows what he's doing now the rest of the way through, right? Versus if he comes up and scratches one out, it's going to take a lot to change his mind the rest of the way through, no matter how good a caller you are to catch back up. So lead off with your absolute best call, because a judge's mind, in my opinion, is made up within the first 5 seconds of a routine. Slow it down. I like to look at it like, how can I show off my range from a high note bugle, a good lip ball? I want to show that I can chuckle and grunt pretty well. I want to show that I can scream. And then like at least look at those 4 or 5, good sounds that every judge is looking for that are, and then I might go to like a raghorn bugle just to kind of show I've just showed you I can do everything at the biggest, baddest bull range. Now let's go and do more of a mediocre or like a mid note bugle. And just kind of add some of those natural bugles in on the end. But yeah, on my 45-second bull routine, I would shoot for 6 to 7 bugles maximum. And that's actually going to fill up most of your bugle routine. It's maybe even going to still feel busy, but you're really only trying to hit, 6 or 7 bugles.
What about cow calls? Same thing.
Cow calls is where Paul's alluding to people just start going nuts. And I'm like, at some point, the judge is just like you're like, all right, I'm done. I get it. You can do like a little cow mew. I would rather break it up into sections of here's some cow to calf communication, like and like cow and calf talking back and forth. Maybe do that for 6 or 7 seconds, and then maybe add in like a big, a longer estrus whine, and then maybe throw in your estrus buzz for a second, and then maybe go to a cow bark. But I would rather break it up into chunks, and then that way it doesn't just have you going for 45 seconds straight. And so break it up into little cow sections of cow calf talk, your alarm bark, your estrus buzz, your estrus whines, and then go with that. Deep cow calls, small cow calls maybe at the end, whatever you break up into your sections, but keep it pretty clear cut. That way you're not just hammering the same note over and over.
Yeah, I was going to start out with the cow to calf communication, and maybe throw in like a lost mew, and a regathering mew, and an estrus buzz, and then and maybe a little like the demanding mew on one of those. Throw that after, and then return back to the communication or something. I don't know. Yeah, this is interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and then I always try to remember who my judges are. And this is not a downplay on anybody, but a lot of these guys are like guides and outfitters that may not be the best caller anyways, and they're used to using like external cow calls. So I'm like always overthinking, like, do they really love the sound of like an external bite and blow call? I'm not gonna lie, especially at the World Championships, like I'm usually so nervous on stage that I can't hold my damn call still anyways to like get it, it's like so now that I did it more, I would probably go back to that. But I remember like in the early days of calling, like I can't run that call, so I never went to one. But a judge may really like the sound of a good external, and if that's your strong suit, I would be willing to add that in too, just to kind of change it up.
I did stand up comedy once just because I wanted to get in front, just try it. But I like with that I've watched some calling contests. You don't really have to look at the audience. Like you can turn
No.
away, and that way it won't. Also everyone's looking at you, and it's when I was doing stand up, dude.
Yeah.
Wow, everyone's. I even said on the video, I'm like, wow, I'm nervous right now because. But
Yeah.
it was cool
Yeah.
to be up there. So yeah, this will be kind of similar to that. But now I can like turn my back and see. What do you think? I was thinking about like I was gonna do like a location bugle and face one direction and then go off and throw a chuckle in, because a lot of times that's a reaction I've had is I'll blow a
Yeah.
location bugle and then I've had that chuckle come right back at me, and then maybe
Yeah.
I'm gonna stuff like that.
Yeah, and you can play little scenarios like that through your calling that judges will probably pick up on. One thing I just want to go back to you saying you can turn your back to the crowd. I don't know where the judges are going to sit for this contest, but be very careful about like blowing directly at the judges because they can pick up on any little imperfection, and a lot of times if it blows their ears out, then they're not happy with it anyways. So if you turn your back, like a lot of imperfection or like real subtle changes can't be heard by the judge.
Gotcha.
Versus if you're pointing right at them, they're going to pick all of that up. So as much as it sucks to look at the crowd, like it might be your better option. And then, calling into the floor or wherever you're standing gives a different, like resonant back to the judge versus like, if there's a corner of the room or if it's outside, like all of that would kind of change what I was thinking when I got up on the stage. Like, do I want to bugle into the floor? Do I want to bugle into like the corner of the room? Because that gives like the best, like all of that stuff has to be determined on the stage. I don't know if it really matters that much, but be careful if you're going right to the judges that it's like a real subtle note or like a, that it's not going to cost you by blowing right at them.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I never thought about that. So yeah, I'll take that in consideration. Are you going to be there at Big Sky?
I'm not. This must be at the TAC. Is this at the TAC event then?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're so dang busy here. I can't get out.
Are you going to make any archery shoots this year? Or no?
I don't think so. My archery shoots this year are going to consist of the target in the driveway, I think. Yeah.
That's pretty much what mine is. I've never done it. This is my first time out in the mountains and doing total archery. And I interviewed Sean like way back, one of my first podcasts, and I can't remember I've been in contact because I have a service dog and I was they won't let her come up on the lift. So I got a buddy, he works with Numa. Is it right? Numa?
Yep.
Kim?
Yep.
Yeah. And he's gonna watch her while I'm up shooting, and then
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can't remember what courses because when I signed up, everything was going so quick. So I just like took the 2 available ones, and now I have no clue what times anything. And I've been trying to get I've been contacting his wife and figuring out I know I'm supposed to do this Saturday and Sunday, but it's gonna be fun. I'm excited.
We did a lot of the mountain shoots in the past, and they're kicking the pants. I really like those courses and the shots that are presented over, say, just your normal 3D shoots, around town.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I made sure I bought the cheapest Easton arrows. They're called Storms. They shoot great. I know I should have my hunting 7 up, but I know I'm gonna F up a ton of arrows. So I've got the cheapest ones that I could find. What state you hunting this year?
So myself and Steve are going to hunt in New Mexico elk, and then I'm going to go call for Ryan Lampers and Dirk in New Mexico after that. I drew a general in Montana, so I've got a general in Montana elk and deer tag. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do there and when. And then I've got an Oregon rifle elk tag in the blues again. So it's a really good tag. I was fortunate enough to hunt the archery tag in there in 19. And so to have the rifle tag, it should be a really, really fun hunt. No calling involved, but it's still elk hunting. And I just love, regardless of weapon and in ways I love to just elk hunt. I'm an opportunist, so if there's a chance, I'll be
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and muzzleload this year. I've never done that, so try a
Yeah.
little muzzleloader. Have you ever spot and stock, just never, like, you saw a bull and it was a herd bull, and because I interviewed, I don't know if you know who Brian Barney is
Yep.
on here. Yeah, he did my podcast, and he said that's all he does. And he says he'll find
Yeah.
that herd bull and get after it, and because he thinks the calling, just he doesn't, he likes it, but he doesn't, he just feels more confident he's gonna get that bigger bull by just spotting and stalking it.
Yeah, and there's a lot to that. Chuck Adams, who at a time I think had like the number 1 and 2 bull of all time. That guy never blew on a call, or at least not very often. All those, and so there's no denying that spot and stock can work, and maybe calling doesn't work on some of those bigger bulls. But and I can't qualify this, but I bet you I have more fun archery elk hunting than these guys at spot and stock. Like we're playing a game where I'm trying to communicate on their level and get them to respond in a way, versus like, I love mule deer hunting, but I feel like you did, and where these guys are sneaking in with a bow, like they're still having to fool their nose, they're having to fool their ears. But there's nothing in that spot and stock that's as cool as, like, you just ripped off a bugle at a bull and he fires back within, a breath, a blink of an eye, and he turns his head as he rips through a brush coming at you to kill you. Like there's no way to replace that feeling with like spot and stock. Now, like there's people that are very, very successful at spot and stalking, and I would probably be willing to say if you can see them and go spot and stalk a bigger bull, then all the power to you, especially during the peak of the rut when they're being pretty noisy on their own. I'm just out there for a different reason. Like I want to interact. I want to experience, me versus another bull while I'm in the woods with the bow in my hand.
Yeah, I feel you there. It's turkey hunting on steroids and human growth hormone. That's what elk hunting is.
Yeah.
It's like, man,
Yeah.
you're right. You hear that, especially when you hear that bugle so close and you can like hear, that guttural sound. That's wow.
Yeah, when you can hear it and feel it at the same time, then they're close, and it's like it's just a different level at that point versus we have spot and stalked a lot, but then we usually get in close and finish them off with a call. But we haven't truly like just snuck in all the way and then finished them. It's more of an ambush. We'll get very, very close and then get them to pull 20 yards or 30 yards with a call.
Last question: what's your dream hunt that you haven't done yet? What's your dream hunt?
Dream hunt, like I'll add to it. Like can't wait for the day for a Utah or an archery elk hunt, like just a real high quality tag. Like I'm looking forward to that. But as far as dream hunts, ever since I was little and kind of figured out that sheep live in cool places, like a stone sheep hunt would probably be, my dream hunt. I do have a Dall sheep hunt booked for 2024, so I'll get to hunt. They're a lot cheaper white cousin. Just a Dall sheep, but stone sheep, if I could just say, pick any hunt on this map, I would probably go that. That's an attainable, dream hunt. There's Marco Polos and stuff that are going to cost you a lot more than that would be cool. But as far as like from a younger kid, like a stone sheep hunt would be really cool.
Where are you doing your Dell hunt?
Up in Alaska, up on just adjacent to the Toke mountain range. So
okay, I did you ever heard of Greg McHale? They're up there in Greg McHale's Yukon Wild.
I don't know if I've heard of Yukon Wild.
Yeah, he was one of my first podcasts. That's his thing. He loves sheep hunting. Yeah, he gets after it. He's a good dude. You should if you ever want to sheep hunting stuff, he's a good dude. Well, listen, Jason, this is awesome. I'm really happy you came on because it's getting close. It's that.
Yeah.
Oh, it goes by fast, and I wish you luck. And you got a new bugle, that metal tube. What's the deal with that?
So we've been working on that for over 18 months. We've got the patent approved. We're just kind of waiting on the USPTO to kind of give us our number. So it's been a cool process. It's our first patented product. It's an all aluminum tube, and then what's even cooler about it though, the aluminum tube's cool, but the attachment. So we've got our Easy Bugler mouthpiece that's going to be able to attach to it, as well as a flared option. Aluminum gives you a higher pitched ring, like plastic just won't hit a high note all the way up. And then this aluminum tube is louder than heck. You know, me and Dirk did a bunch of side by side, and we just cannot be as loud as we can on the aluminum tube with the plastic. The other advantage, you'd think aluminum would be noisier out in the woods because it's going to clank off of trees and stuff. We designed a neoprene sleeve that will go over it and actually makes it way more dead than a plastic tube ever has. So we've basically taken our very good plastic tubes and improved on them through a different material. So yeah, they're going to be loud. They're going to allow somebody that can't run a diaphragm to bugle very well with the Easy Bugler diaphragm. You know, external mouthpiece, and so we're excited about it. The response has been more overwhelming than any other product releases in the past. So we're super excited. And then to piggyback on that, we have a new dedicated calf call coming out called the Youngin. We're going to start promoting that, and then we have a new mini line of diaphragms. Over the last 3 years, we released the Amp frame. You know, a huge success all across the industry on it for a diaphragm. And then now we've basically just made a mini for people that can't run the Amp frame. So that's kind of our new releases here for this year. We are getting close, but we're hoping to have those released here in the next week or two, which today is what, July 14th. So just a time date this. Hopefully within the next week we'll have all the stuff available to the customers.
Excellent. Now, I already love your Unleashed tube. That's like I've tried tubes, and that's the tube I love. So what are you calling this? Is metal? That's the name of the tube?
We're just calling it metal, just metal.
Okay.
That's
okay.
Even though it's aluminum, we tried to make a play on the AL out of metal, and it got shot down. We figured some people wouldn't get it, and so we just left it with metal.
Yeah, that's metal. Sweet.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Just it's a type of metal.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Hey,
Thanks for having me,
give out that social media, your websites and all that stuff for people.
So yeah, we're super available all over. A lot of times myself or Dirk will answer the questions anyway. So we're on Instagram at Phelps Game Calls. We're on Facebook, Phelps Game Calls business page, and then feel free to reach out to my personal page as well, Jason Phelps on Facebook, and our website is www.phelpsgamecalls.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Good luck this year, and I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
All right, bye.
Bye.